Edgar Cayce's Planetary Sojourn in Mars. Part 1. A soul's sojourn in Mars will provide that soul with the following qualities: anger, a strong mental feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. Madness, a mental state of wild or chaotic activity. Wrath, extreme anger or rage. Strength, a state of being mentally or physically strong. Endurance, the mental ability to endure an unpleasant or difficult process or situation without giving way. For Mars represents and is the influence that makes for urges within the innate forces of anger, madness, wrath, strength, endurance. The influences in Mars make for anger, animosity, those conditions that are antagonistic often to those great loving forces from the Venus sojourn. Mars indicates the quick temperament, quick to show resentments, quick to make for actions or decisions. In Mars we find that tendency at times to become easily erratic, easily ruffled. In the astrological aspects, these have been rather as hindrances, especially in those of Mars, where madness or wrath at times has and does wield an influence. In Mars, we find those tendencies oft for the entity to become rather in the manner of too easily misdirected by considered slights, or little differences that arise between associates or individuals. Or there are tendencies for what in others would be wrath. From Mars also we find a benevolent influence, so that in the entity's experience it may be found that oft upon the activities of others in disputes, in wrath, in anger, there may come from the entity's own attitude, as to its mental influences, conditions and experiences even in the material world that are beneficent influences in the entity's activity. In Mars also we find those influences in which anger, madness at times arises. Be angry but sin not. For he that never is angry is worth little, but he that is angry and controlleth it not, is worthless. Then know that the emotions that arise from those things, that in thine experience become antagonistic, have their place, but do not abuse, either in knowledge, or in thy freedom in him. The influence in Mars we find making for anger, and again a temperament, yet bringing into the forces those things where anger, wrath, war, turmoils, strifes among groups and individuals, have made for sudden changes in the activities of the entity in its relationships to the material life. Those in Mars make for periods where even in the present sojourn there have been differences, or where anger and misunderstanding have made for changes in the environs, changing in the attitude and in the position or conditions from the material angle. Also we find those influences in Mars that make for easy to anger, and this unless curbed within the experience of the entity may bring those influences, those forces as will make for detrimental force. Anger is worthy, but anger uncontrolled is productive of the basis of those things that bring destruction in the experience of self and the purposes for which and to which the entity may lend self. Through Mars we find those influences that may be considered as indiscretions of others, as well as madness and war, have brought many changes and many influences in the experience of the entity in the present, making not merely for habit-forming conditions but experiences that have changed the course of events, changed the course of habits, changed the course of relationships of the entity in the experience. In Mars we find the adverse influence, where anger, discussion, or the like at times brings those attitudes desired to be eliminated. These may best be eliminated through the cultivation of that consciousness, or awareness, of the abiding of peace within self. For, peace and harmony, as the entity experiences, not as all others, but as the entity experiences, is a matter of being able to hold within self the awareness of the promises of life and light, as expressed in him. Those influences in Mars make for that quick temper at times that arises. While self has controlled, and does control self in these directions most of the time. The activities in the mental and the spiritual should make for the developing of the abilities in self mentally that, though anger may arise in the experience with the associations of things and individuals, there is the ability to use rather than be used by such conditions, which will make for the stronger character building in the entity. We find those influences from Mars making radical activities that have been about the entity, bringing the entity in contact with those forces or influences where anger, wrath, has made for disturbing forces. These may, if the entity allows same, become part of the experience. But if that balance is held which is innate within self, these may be used as stepping stones rather than stumbling stones as they have in some of the experiences in the present. Mars has made for those forces where anger, wrath, and the like have become such at times that the necessity of choice became paramount to be weighed with those innate feelings that all of such experiences are worthy of being considered, and not thrown aside lightly. Either are they to be dwelt upon in such measures or manners as to become paramount. For the creating of anger breeds contempt. Contempt gone to fruition breeds strife, and makes for disturbing forces that become, in the experiences of the entity, those things that bring in harmony. In Mars we find those fits of anger, resentment, selfishness here and there, those impure motives creating those struggles, those entanglements, those angers. Yet these as they arise upon thy horizon of activity in thy relationships may oft keep from view the visions of that glory prepared for those who love the Lord. Yet know that truth and light, as may be aroused or made alive from the assurances of his walks with thee, will dissipate those fogs, those mists, as ye apply love in thy dealings with every character of circumstance in thy experience with others. Then these will matter little, for the Lord's ways are not past finding out, yet ye must oft learn to wait upon the Lord, and not become over-anxious, in thy anxiety that they, too, taste of the goodness that may be found in the divine love,